Hi again then guys, and we are finally back after quite a long gap in videos on the channel, but now we are back thanks to Opage, and there are still a couple of little things that I'm sorting out on the channel, but back is better regardless. And we are returning to the schedule exactly where we left off before the whole Elgato situation. So here we are on episode 32 of Ultimate Exotics, the review series for Gran Turismo's pretty strong selection of top-end supercars. And in this particular episode we're featuring one of the cream of the cream, one of the very, very top-most supercars featured on Gran Turismo. Justifiably so? Perhaps not. Definitely not, as far as I'm concerned, but regardless of my opinion, that is the way it is on the game, and that may change in the future, because Gran Turismo over the years have, with each iteration of the game, changed how good certain vehicles are, and made them worse or made them better accordingly. Most notably vehicles like the TVR Speed 12, which have been significantly hampered on GT6. This vehicle is, of course, the Alfa Romeo TZ3, and it's based mechanically on the SRT or Dodge Viper SRT10. So it's got an 8.4 litre supercharged V10 when fully upgraded, and it puts out more power than any of the Vipers on GT6. 1,206 horsepower, fully tuned, and 989 foot-pounds of torque. Which is interesting. Not quite as much torque as the Vipers, but more power. Which is kind of odd, considering that it's using a Viper engine, yet it has drastically different specs. As far as the weight, it's a reasonably good car. It weighs 1,247 kilos, which is less than, say, a GT3 machine, so that's pretty impressive with the full weight loss package. And when you combine that with its massive power, it does put out a respectable 967 horsepower per tonne, which is in the higher level of the supercars on the game. The PP is pretty high, but not necessarily as high as it could be given how fast the car is. This is a car which you don't need me to tell you how fast it can be. Pretty much everyone knows it's one of the quickest cars in the game. When Gran Turismo 6 first came out, within the first couple of months, the TZ3 remained pretty much the most unbeatably good car, because back then when the game first came out, people still weren't sure exactly how to tame vehicles like the Veyrons and the Huayras. So the TZ3, which had good handling even with stock suspension, naturally dominated online racing on Special Stage Route X. And that is by far this car's most useful track. It's not a bad car anywhere else, it's just at its best in a straight line at high speed and for high speed cornering. The high speed cornering and handling is very good, it's very stable, very smooth, perhaps a little bit too forgiving in my opinion, but nonetheless if you're going to be one or the other, being slightly more forgiving is probably better than being unforgiving at all. Its performance is, as we mentioned, incredibly strong. The top speed is in excess of 306 miles per hour, without NOS and without draft. It can maintain that under its own power, which is absolutely ridiculous of course, but that's the way it is on Gran Turismo 6. It's completely unfair that the car is that fast, especially considering that it doesn't have that much more power than the Vipers, and it's not that much more aerodynamic either, especially compared to the hardtop Vipers. But that's the way it is, and we can't really do anything about that. As far as price, this is just over a 600 grand car, 605,000 credits. So for a supercar of its speed, it's pretty good. One of the main downsides for me personally of this vehicle, apart from the fact that absolutely everybody uses it, which immediately puts me off, I understand if that's not considered a downside by everyone, but I prefer exclusivity, is that you can't paint it. And that's very disappointing, because it means that every single one you will ever see on GT6, unless they change the game in an update, will always be red. And although red is far from being an ugly or bad colour for the car, it kind of gets boring fast when everyone's is red. At least if it were able to be changed to, say, yellow, silver, or some other colour, it would make it a lot more interesting. But again, that's something we don't have any say in at the moment, unfortunately. Overall, the TZ3 is, as many people know, a very strong supercar. But what about as a track car? Because being a supercar isn't just about straight line performance on the game, it needs to be able to, at least to some degree, back that up around a circuit. So can the TZ3 do that with that massive V10 engine and so much power to deal with? Well, happily, it can. As I said earlier, the handling is surprisingly forgiving. There's a decent amount of grip, even with the full 1206 horsepower, and it's a relatively beginner-friendly car, to be honest, around the track. As I mentioned earlier, the stock suspension is already pretty good on this car, and if you're looking for a car which will naturally dominate the AI opposition on most circuits, especially open circuits, it's a pretty good car to go for. There are certainly cars that are better track cars for a lower price, but this car, if you are interested in it, is a good value vehicle. As far as its range of potential around the track, it's frankly not the best of supercars. It doesn't handle badly. In fact, funnily enough, I would say it's actually kind of the opposite. The handling is, as I mentioned, a little bit too soft. Even if you stiffen up the springs, increase the camber, etc., it still feels a little bit too friendly. The car's a little bit too forgiving overall. But that is a relatively petty downside overall, and if you are looking for a strong supercar, it's a good one to go for. But that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.